Hi there, my name is Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel BandysBooks, and today I am here with a 2022 wrap-up video. This is just going to be a generalized video, just kind of some statistics, how many books I read, how many pages I read, how the genre breakdown went, you know, that kind of a thing. And then next week I'll have a 22 favorite books from 2022 and also my least favorite books of 2022. So if you're not really interested in statistics and like numbers and graphs and stuff, then this is probably not the video for you. But if you, like me, are a big graphing fan and like to look at breakdowns, then maybe you'll enjoy this. And excuse Luna back here, she's going nuts. Like, we've been trying to start this video for quite a bit here, and she's been like zooming in and out playing with her toys. So she's somewhat content back there chewing with her dragon right now. So we're just gonna, you know, let her do her thing. So first of all, the big number for the year, I ended up reading 274 books in 2022. That's across a variety of formats. Most of them were physical books. I don't really like to read ebooks, so I only read a couple books off of ebooks, and typically it was like orchestrated, like if I was going to be on a road trip or something, I might bring an ebook with me, but otherwise I really prefer not to read ebooks at all. Some of them were audiobooks. I do like to listen to audiobooks occasionally at work and things like that, but most of the books that I read, probably at least a good 220 of them, were physical copies that I own or borrowed from the library, things like that. So pretty excited about that number. 274 is a pretty solid year. I definitely think towards the end of the year my number started to fall off. Like when we show the breakdown of the months, you'll see that I started the year really strong. I was averaging really high numbers for my months, and then towards the end of the year it kind of faded off. And that's because my work went crazy. All right, so my month by month breakdown is that in January I read 20 books, in February I read 19 books, in March I killed it and read 32 books, April I read 24 books, in May, I read 27 books, and in June, my birthday month, I managed 22 books. In July, I managed 29. In August, I did 22, and September was my slowest month. I did 17 books. October, I managed 22 books. November, I managed 18 books, and then I finished out the year strong with 21 books in December. So I'm pretty pleased with that spread. I think that I pretty consistently average like around 22 books a month. I read just over 100,000 pages this year. I averaged about 370 pages per book. So I feel pretty good about that. I think it makes sense because most of the time books that I pick up tend to be in the 300 to 400 page range. That's not like an intentional choice. It's not like I'm like, oh, this is a big book, I'm not going to read it, or a small book, I'm not going to read it. Just that typically that's where my books tend to be, is between 300 and 400 pages. My biggest book this year was the book 2666 by Roberto Bolaño, and it was about 1,100 pages total. Trying to shoot videos with dogs. She's lucky she's cute. So that was my biggest book, and I think my shortest book was The Santa Suit by Mary Kay Andrews that I read during my romance month because somebody gifted it to me, and that was like 150 pages, I want to say. So quite the disparity between the 150 pages and the 1,100 pages, but it's all good. I managed to complete books in 2 languages this year, both in English and in Spanish, and I'm really proud of myself because my largest book of the year, 2666, was read in Spanish. It was a large book and very challenging for me. Lots of words that I had to stop and look up. I am hopefully going to try to read more books in Spanish coming into 2023. I think last year I only read a handful, and I think I could do better on that front for sure. I have quite a few books in Spanish on my shelves, so I have really no excuse. I think my goal this year is going to be to try to read 1 book in Spanish per month every single month, and I'll be really happy with that if I can get that done. Maybe I can even do more, but for now 1 per month would be great. In those 274 books, I did manage to complete 4 series. I'm pretty excited about that. I finished the Poppy War trilogy, the Broken Earth trilogy, the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy, and the Hawthorne Legacy. So those 4 were pretty good. I also managed to complete all 3 of the Arsenic and Adobo books that are in that series, but I think she's going to be writing more books for that series. And then the big thing is the breakdown of genres. So some of this was exactly as I expected. I love historical fiction, I love fantasy, I'm a big reader of like contemporary fiction and stuff like that. So I expected those numbers to be pretty high, but I was a little bit surprised about some of the numbers. So my highest read genre was fantasy. I finished 43 fantasy books in 2022. That's pretty standard for me. I really like fantasy for the mental release, like the ability to suspend what's going on in my real world and imagine something completely fictional. So that's my go-to stress relief. I'm totally not surprised about the 43 fantasy. Next up was contemporary fiction. I managed 41 contemporary fiction books. I feel like that's a little higher just because it's such a broad spectrum of books that fit within contemporary fiction. I don't know, like, if I had gotten a little more nitpicky and broken it into subgenres, if it would necessarily be like one big number like that. Thrillers was third, and it came in with 35 books. I will say that while I read a lot of thrillers this year, I was really disappointed by a lot of thrillers this year. There's only a couple that I can think of off the top of my head that I actually really enjoyed, which is kind of depressing. I felt like a lot of them were very generic, standard. So if you have any good thriller recommendations that you read in 2022 that I missed out on, please tell me in the comments, because I am dying for some thriller redemption, really. And then historical fiction came in fourth with 31. That's pretty standard for me. That's one of my favorite genres. I also participated in a Historathon in November, so extra incentive to read historical fiction. So pretty standard. That was actually probably, I think, one of the strongest genres for me too. I feel like I read a lot of really good historical fiction. Both fantasy and historical fiction were strong last year. So now the big shocker. The genre that I like the least and typically read the least came in at fifth, and that was romance. I managed 30 books that fall into the romance category in 2022. So the thing that's interesting about this is, like, if you think of like fluffy kind of chick lit romance where it's like, you know, girl meets guy, they miscommunicate. Well, girl meets guy, they fall in love, then they miscommunicate, they go their separate ways, they're both depressed, and then they regroup and everything's all good. I only read like 10 of those. So a lot of the books that were in this romance genre were things like The Paper Palace, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, where they're like tragic romance, or like they're more about like real relationships and less like the fantasy romance that exists in a lot of like fluffy romance. So I felt like my romance numbers could have almost been divided in half between the month that I read romance, where it was like fluffy, light romance, and then the romance that I read throughout the rest of the year, where it was like more real life romance, tragic, you know, darker, more emotional, not necessarily happily ever after. So it's kind of interesting seeing those numbers, because like I said, I don't think of myself as a big romance reader. It's like my least favorite genre, but I think that effort to really read romance this year really obviously bumped that up. So I had 19 memoirs and 18 nonfiction books. I was pretty pleased with those numbers. I definitely am going to be trying to read more nonfiction in 2023 than I managed in 2022 for sure, because as you can see, the fiction to nonfiction ratio is quite lopsided. Excuse my crazy dog here. She's decided that she wants to play. After that, I had 12 horror books, which is okay. I thought that I would have read a little more horror, because I've been finding that I kind of enjoy it a little more than I thought initially, but not the strongest horror numbers. Definitely need to work on that this year. And then sci-fi was another shocker. I was only at 10 sci-fi books, and I feel like I was like really in a sci-fi vibe this year. I was like loving everything that I read for sci-fi, but for some reason it's one of those genres where I love it whenever I read it, but I don't think about it that often. So I definitely want to prioritize sci-fi a little bit in 2023. And then literary fiction only had 7. That's also surprising to me. I think some of the books that I put in the contemporary fiction category could maybe be crossovers into lit fic, but yeah, I'm surprised that only 7 like really prosy literary fiction type books. So that also will probably change up a little bit. So I had 5 dark academia books. Typically I would have shuffled like dark academia into fantasy or mystery or somewhere else, but these 5 books really kind of had a very specific dark academia vibe. They didn't quite fit into fantasy, didn't quite fit into mystery, kind of was their own little thing. So we've made them their own little category. And then after that, I did read 5 cozy mysteries. I had never read cozy mysteries before. I didn't actually even know that was a thing. And then I got inspired to check out cozy mysteries because of the Arsenic and Adobo series. So I grew up in a Filipino neighborhood, so it was really exciting seeing like comfort food and hearing Tagalog used in the book and like all the cultural stuff that was included. So if you really like cozy mysteries, that's a great series to check out. It's just a lot of fun and it's enjoyable. After that, I had 4 mythology-based books and 3 children's books. Kind of surprised on the children's books because obviously there's no kids in my family. I'm the baby of the family, so I'm the last kid, I guess. And so I don't get exposed to children's books very often. So 3 children's books for me, that's not bad. They were actually rereads of books that I had read previously, The Phantom Tollbooth, A Wrinkle in Time, and I forget what the third one was. And my last 2 categories, I had 2 books that were classified as noir and 2 books that I didn't know where to put, so I called them warm fuzzies. They're just books that feel good, make you feel good, you know, leave you feeling all warm and fuzzy inside. That was Under the Whispering Door and The Guncle. Both are just like feel-good, happy stories. So I think we've covered everything important. We've got the total amount of books, the pages, the genres, how it broke down over months, all that sort of stuff. Those are all the statistics for 2022. Like I said, upcoming next week, I'll have my favorite books and my least favorite books. I think I'm also going to be doing a ranking of all my book of the month picks later in the month. You know, everything from 2022, so you can kind of see what I enjoyed, what I didn't. And yeah, so there will be a few more things if you're interested in the year past. There's also a lot of stuff coming with, you know, moving forward. So I hope this was enjoyable for you. I love geeking out about stats. I hope that you enjoyed geeking out with me. Let me know down below any interesting stat that you have for your year. What was your biggest book, your shortest book? How many pages did you read? Like, tell me all about it. I want to hear all about your reading life. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss a video, and then we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.